In the heart of Tehran, under the watchful eyes of the oppressive regime, something unthinkable happened. A man raised an Israeli flag in Freedom Square, one of the city's most iconic and heavily monitored locations. It wasn't just an act of rebellion, it was a loud, defiant statement against the Iranian regime's narrative. But what's even more startling is what came next, a video of an Iranian man delivering a lecture that acknowledged Israel's strength and openly criticized the regime's misguided view of its enemy. The story is about much more than a flag. It's about defiance, crumbling propaganda, and an emerging admiration for Israel's military power. And to truly understand this event, we must look to someone who has dedicated his life to amplifying such stories of courage, Rani Amrani. Rani Amrani, who was previously featured on our channel, is no stranger to stories like these. As a Jewish boy growing up in post-revolution Iran, he was forced to chant death to Israel while secretly harboring a love for the Jewish state. At just 16, Rani fled Iran on foot, escaping persecution to find freedom in Israel. Today, Rani runs Radio Iran, a Persian-language station in Israel, broadcasting truth to millions inside Iran. From his studio in Israel, he's become a lifeline for Iranians desperate for freedom, exposing the regime's lies and amplifying stories of resistance. This isn't the first time Iranians have raised Israeli flags, Amrani reveals, but raising it in a place as central and symbolic as Freedom Square, that's unheard of. The video captures a moment that few would believe possible in today's Tehran. A man stands in the bustling Freedom Square, holding an Israeli flag high against the backdrop of one of Iran's most heavily monitored landmarks. The footage, smuggled out of Iran by courageous individuals, spread quickly across social media, capturing the imagination of millions. Rani Amrani was among the first to authenticate the video. It's not just about a flag, he explains. It's about what the flag represents to the people of Iran. To the regime, it's a symbol of their sworn enemy. But to those defying the regime, it's a symbol of resistance, freedom, and hope. The video sparked widespread reactions from celebrating the man's courage to questioning how he pulled off such a daring act. Even as the footage went viral, the man's identity remained a mystery, fueling speculation about his fate. In Iran, defiance comes at a staggering cost. The regime's grip on power is maintained through fear, surveillance, and brutal crackdowns. Yet, despite the risks, brave individuals continue to push back. The man who raised the Israeli flag in Freedom Square risked everything. Standing exposed in broad daylight, he openly defied a regime that equates such acts with treason. This man didn't even try to hide his identity, Amrani says. He knew the risks and still chose to act. For many, defiance is about hope for a better future. It's also a message to the world. The Iranian people are not the regime. As Amrani states, each act of defiance, no matter how small, is a spark. When enough sparks ignite, they create a fire that even the most brutal regimes cannot extinguish. A second video, linked to the flag-raising incident, offers a rare glimpse into the cracks forming within the regime's propaganda. In it, an Iranian man admits, "We think fighting Israel is like a PlayStation video game, but the strength of Israel is the strength of the West. It's not a joke." His words dismantle the regime's portrayal of Israel as a weak adversary. Amrani highlights the significance. For years, the regime claimed Israel was a fragile state, but now even Hezbollah fighters, who are supported by Iran, admit that Israel's strength is unmatched. The lecture is both a warning and a revelation, exposing the regime's inability to control the narrative. As Amrani concludes, when people within the system question the system itself, that's when real change begins. For decades, the Iranian regime has built its authority on the narrative that Israel is weak and Iran's power is unshakable. But recent events, including Israel's precision strikes on Iranian assets and its dismantling of terror networks, have exposed the regime's vulnerabilities. Amrani explains the Iranian people are not blind. They see the contrast between the regime's claims and the reality on the ground. Even among the regime's loyalists, doubts are growing. These cracks in the propaganda create openings for truth to emerge, a truth that is increasingly impossible to suppress. For many Iranians, Israel is more than an adversary of the regime. It's a symbol of resilience, hope, and the possibility of freedom. Through precision strikes, economic sanctions, and covert support for opposition groups, Israel weakens the regime while inspiring its opponents. There's a growing realization among Iranians, Amrani says, that Israel's actions aren't about targeting the Iranian people. They're about targeting the regime that oppresses them. As Amrani poignantly states, Israel is more than just an adversary of the regime. For the Iranian people, it's a symbol of what's possible, a free and thriving nation standing against tyranny. The Israeli flag waving in the heart of Tehran was more than an act of defiance. It was a symbolic cry for freedom, a testament to the courage and resilience of the Iranian people. For decades, the regime has controlled the narrative, but this act challenges everything it stands for. This isn't just about one man or one moment. It's about an entire population that is tired of oppression. Amrani reflects, the regime wants to frame its people as enemies of the world. But acts like this show the truth. The people of Iran are allies of freedom, of peace, and of justice. The world must respond to this cry for freedom through support for grassroots movements, sanctions, and amplifying the voices of dissent. History shows us that change begins with individuals who refuse to accept the status quo. The man in Freedom Square is one such individual, igniting a fire of resistance that cannot be extinguished. What's remarkable about this act of defiance is the growing acknowledgement of Israel not as an enemy, but as a symbol of resilience and hope among Iranians. Despite decades of state-sponsored propaganda vilifying Israel, acts like this demonstrate a profound shift in perception within Iran. For many Iranians, Israel has come to represent strength in the face of adversity, a thriving nation that overcame existential challenges to build a prosperous and free society. The raised flag was not just a rejection of the regime's lies, but also a silent call for solidarity. Iranians are increasingly seeing Israel not as a threat, but as an example of what their country could become if freed from tyranny. As Rani Amrani explains, many Iranians see Israel as a modern-day David standing against the Goliaths of the region. They admire its ability to thrive despite being surrounded by adversaries, and they find inspiration in its story. This admiration is reinforced by Israel's direct and symbolic actions, whether it's through precision military operations targeting regime-backed proxies like Hezbollah, or through public outreach efforts aimed at Iranian citizens. Israel is demonstrating that its quarrel is with the regime, not the people. These efforts are not going unnoticed. Iranians who follow these stories, often through underground media or platforms like Radio Iran, are beginning to understand that Israel's actions are meant to counter the same oppressive forces they are fighting. Israel's cultural ties to Persia, dating back to the time of King Cyrus the Great, who freed the Jewish people from Babylonian captivity, are also gaining renewed significance. As Iranians reflect on their country's history and the shared heritage with Israel, many are beginning to see a potential for future friendship. This sentiment is evident in the stories shared by dissidents and protesters, some of whom have called for rebuilding bridges with Israel as part of a post-regime future. Rani Amrani often hears these sentiments directly from his audience. Listeners tell me when we are free, we want to visit Israel, to see the places we've only heard about in secret. Some even speak of Israel as a model for resilience and innovation that Iran could learn from once the regime falls. Support for Israel in Iran is also growing among younger generations who are less influenced by the regime's propaganda and more connected to global perspectives through the internet. For these young Iranians, Israel represents modernity, freedom, and the possibility of building a democratic society. By embracing these sentiments and amplifying the voices of Iranians who view Israel as an ally, the world can help foster a future where Israel and Iran are not adversaries, but partners in peace and progress. This moment is an opportunity for Israel and its allies to extend a hand to the Iranian people, not just military might alone, but through cultural outreach, educational initiatives, and messages of solidarity. The flag raised in Freedom Square is more than a bold act of defiance. It's an invitation for dialogue, understanding, and a shared vision of what the future could hold. The world must ensure that this invitation does not go unanswered. What do you think of this extraordinary act of defiance? How should the global community respond to the Iranian people's cry for help? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video, click thanks, and subscribe for more stories that challenge the narrative. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching.